Mark Zuckerberg went in a surprise interview that nobody saw coming. He went on Joe Rogan this week, and I'm sure we'll get into our thoughts on Joe Rogan. But what's really the focus here is what Mark Zuckerberg had to say about the definitely non-censoring of the Hunter Biden laptop. Here we go.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story. The New York Post.
We have that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false.
No.
And
no.
For
not you.
I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically
just the people we hired to decide.
Being determined whether it was false. The distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it. You could still consume it.
We just wouldn't show it.
Can you say the distribution is decreed?
It got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little.
So it's like you can share it in like a Word document. It has the same value. Like you can still put it on the internet, but no, we're not going to show it to people.
You could print it out and hand it to someone.
Right.
We wouldn't prevent that.
Yeah, you can mail it if you're so inclined, but we won't let that get to them either.
But less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's
bullshit. Do you think there's like? Did you watch this interview? Because
at the top of my, I've only seen this clip that you.
I watched. Yeah, I watched the whole 3 hours, and it is amazing how little Mark Zuckerberg knows about Facebook when it's really convenient for him to not know a thing about Facebook. But I don't know.
So which story are we supposed to believe? That he coded Facebook alone from scratch, or that he doesn't really know what goes on back there?
Depends on the day. Depends on what he's in trouble for, I suppose.
Yeah. It's meaningful, but basically, a lot of people were still able to share it. We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is a hyper political issue, so depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement.
Very professional.
They come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Did they specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
I don't remember. Wow. Like the story that I just talked about for 3 minutes.
They mentioned that story.
Right.
You just said you suppressed it. Now you're not even sure if that's even the story. Wow.
If he's good at one thing, it is covering his ass and playing dumb very well. Yeah.
Is he good at it, though?
We didn't say. Well, I mean, he says it in a way that a normal person would be like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Like, he still let him share it. He was so like that appeases the people that were sharing, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, he's fine."
I can see the comment responses now. Didn't you see? He said they let him share it.
Right. Exactly.
Copy and paste what he said.
And he also didn't say that the FBI. He wasn't sure if the FBI directly said to squash the Hunter Biden story, even though he just talked about it for 2 minutes about how the FBI came to him and said squash the Hunter Biden story. But I don't know. Any thoughts, Mark?
Well, my thought is that this is being shared around like it's explosive news or something like that. But really, all this is a continuation of what's been going on for at least 70 or 80 years. Operation Mockingbird, or whatever you want to call it, where the CIA or other government institutions, perhaps in this case it was done via the FBI, but whatever letters are involved doesn't really fucking matter at the end of the day. The government has been controlling through various means I don't want to say the government. That's almost too blasé of an explanation. But
Yeah.
certain forces have been influencing both the behind the scenes, the way news is reported, what is censored, what is not. And I think most of how news has been censored over the years is much more what you're not shown than what you're shown. It's not necessarily that they lie all the time. It's that they don't give you the full context or they don't give you the real story. So I think this is just another example. It's the modern example of what's been going on for the entire history of media, the United States, probably way more further back than the United States.
Yeah.
Probably since time and propaganda and societies that controlled things existed.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring that up because a point that I don't remember if I made it out loud online or not, but I was thinking it this last week when this Zuckerberg story came out. I saw a bunch of people that were like I did. I shared it and just said, "Oh shit, look at this." I mean, obviously, I wasn't surprised because, duh. Like, of course, the Hunter Biden laptop story has been obviously real since the beginning, and of course, the censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story has been very real, obviously, since the beginning as well. But I also saw a lot of people that were saying kind of what you're saying, which is like, hey, stop acting surprised. This happens all the time. But I think that there is value in still presenting it and being like, holy shit, look at this.
I'm not saying don't share it. This happens all the time. I'm just saying, and this has gone on for 70 years.
Right.
And people should understand the context of that.
I saw some people that were a little bit more aggressive with it, like, oh, you idiots. Like, how could you have not seen this? Like, yeah, but like some people say that about Project Veritas too, because everything that Project Veritas puts out, it is stuff that we've all known, like people who have been, awake to this type of stuff have known for years, but they're showing it in real life in a way that, boomer generations and people who just watch CNN all day can actually digest, and showing it come out of the horse's mouth is something completely different than saying, oh, they were shadow banning people who posted about the Hunter Biden laptop story. It's like, now we have Marc Clair, we have Mark Zuckerberg saying with his own words, the FBI came to us, they told us to shut this shit down, and he can flower it up however he wants, but that is a private company, my private business, bro, colluding with the federal government to censor speech. So
I love how my favorite part is after all that, he's like, and I still do believe they're a worthy institution, obviously. Like,
right.
Didn't you just talked about how they made you censor this story that was obviously we all know is true, even if you didn't know it was true then, which really we should have. But now we all know it's true. Like, it's not even disputed by the mainstream sources that it's true. And yet here, well, I still think they're a worthy institution. Of course, you just said that they made you influence the presidential election, and if you believed in regular numbers counting or whatever, that a story that could have be what cost Trump the election in a world where that legitimately occurred. I'm trying to get you off YouTube. I'm not.
I appreciate it. Yeah, and we talked about
it's the new Marc Clair. You gotta take some risks.
That's right. Yeah, he's a firebrand before he's even a brand. Now, the last night on a show that we recorded that's going to come out in the future that some people might hear, we talked about Joe Rogan, whether or not he's to be trusted. And I want to like Joe Rogan. It's like Elon Musk, where I'm like, I like you. I want to like you. But you're also a perfect package for, like, I don't know, what do you call it? Not a psyop, but like a controlled opposition type individual. Where they give you just enough information that you're like, oh, you're on the level, and then they have somebody on like Mark Zuckerberg for 3 hours plus, and didn't really push him at all, other than, hey, did you guys censor that 100? Like, that was the hardest question that he gave Zuckerberg all night.
Gatekeeping is the word we're looking for here.
Sure,
that's what So I don't know. Did you see Rogan? It seems like you watch a lot of his shows, unless you just went out of your way for the Zuckerberg.
It's really only when like Dave Smith goes on or somebody that I know goes on.
Well, did you watch the Sam
like
Tripoli then? Is the question.
I didn't. No.
Oh, you should. It was good. I mean, I really enjoyed it, but I did tweet something tagging both of them saying it was a prime example of gatekeeping, because to me, and I say this not in a conspiratorial way necessarily, because I've like met Joe Rogan. Like, he seemed really me meeting someone doesn't mean anything, but he seemed cool and genuine at small comedy shows I've been to, like before he was even as big as he is now. And I don't think he's like a secret CIA plant from the
Sure.
beginning. I think it's a role that you could play whether or not you realize you're playing it. So I don't
Right.
even say it necessarily like he's like a secret CIA asset or anything, but I think he is given access to certain people for a reason.
Yeah.
And maybe he just plays the right role, and maybe that doesn't mean it's a conspiracy. It just means he plays the right role. But like in the Tripoli interview, I tweeted that, this is a perfect example of gatekeeping because gatekeeping lets the ideas creep in, but it puts out the ones that don't fit inside the box enough. I noticed
Sure.
he was doing that a lot talking to Tripoli. Like Tripoli you could tell was holding himself back, trying not to be super wackadoo crazy. Like
Sure.
he even said on his next podcast, he's like, look, I held back from going all into the Khazar Empire and all that stuff. So like he kind of held back, but I could see like even when they get into certain areas, even when they started talking about COVID, Joe would still kind of go back to the look, but we all know these guys are just doing their best. Yeah,
Right.
a lot of mistakes were made, but even when he's someone that's been blasted by CNN, they made fun of him with the horse medicine stuff when they took the ivermectin, even though he got better in like 2 days, and they try to take him down a peg. But again, maybe that's part of playing into his role again, whether he means to be in the role or not. This is this alternative force, but he's this sort of approved alternative force. Because if he wasn't, you wouldn't even mention him on the mainstream news.
Right.
You would just ignore it. He would just be canceled. He would just be Alex Jones. He wouldn't exist. So I don't know if Joe Rogan intentionally gatekeeps, but when I hear certain interviews, whether it's with someone about COVID or what have you, I do feel like he's always trying to rein things in a little and constantly remind the listener, okay, but it's not really like, it's not like a conspiracy,
Right.
It's not like people are just trying their best and some, people make mistakes and here we are. That's the nature of things. And he did that a lot. It really stood out to me in the Tripoli interview, maybe because Tripoli is such a contrast to him and the way he sees things. Anyway, Tripoli QT'd me and was like all mad and giving me shit and calling me a loser and stuff.
Nice.
A, it wasn't like, I didn't word it that well. I didn't really say who was doing what, but
Did you call it a
B,
cult?
Yeah. What?
Did you call it a cult like the Mises Caucus?
No, I didn't do that. I didn't go that far yet. But anyway, hopefully now Sam Tripoli knows my name and I could interview him.
There you go. Yeah, I don't necessarily fully subscribe to the, not even as much as I did in the past, of him being like straight controlled opposition. But I'm sure, Mark, you can probably relate to this to some degree. When you play the peacekeeper, when you play the neutral third party that's just always, trying to make friends with people, then it kind of gets a little bit suspicious after a while once you never.
I see where you're going.
Not you in particular. I mean, like Joe Rogan never. I mean, maybe you can relate to it in some aspects, but Joe Rogan seems to like.
I thought
He
this was
always.
tying back into me being a Fed.
Yes. Obviously, you're controlled opposition. No. With Joe Rogan, like even when he has these guys on and he barely pushes them, I think like most realistically in my brain is like he plays a very important role to certain entities, powers that be or whatever, but it's kind of just playing a dummy role, and maybe he's not like, you can push a little controversial in this area or whatever, but obviously don't ream Mark Zuckerberg. That would be dangerous for our brand, or like who knows what kind of control or handlers this guy has. But I think his biggest downfall is that he doesn't want to be mean to people.
Isn't Rogan like tied to Kevin Booth, like the Bill Hicks producer, and to bring this all back to Alex Jones? And Bill Hicks?
I don't know, but it
well,
was
because I do know that he was friends with Bill Hicks and is friends with Alex Jones.
Yeah, that is
and
true.
I think there was a connection to that same producer. I'm pretty sure. Anyway,
so
if you were of a conspiracy mind and you did think there was some weird stuff with Bill Hicks and Alex Jones, and you did think Joe Rogan might be some kind of thing, well, you can lump them all together and make a little story out of it if you think that.
You could. We would never do that. That'd be crazy.
We would never do that, but others could feel free to, were they to choose to do so.
That is correct.
I'll make my shot above the